Washington saw these moves as background noise, the petty grievances of rivals. A fatal misreading. This wasn't petty, it was foundational. Every gold bar bought, every bilateral trade deal signed, every line of digital code written for a new payment system was a brick removed from the dollar's fortress wall. The process was slow, deliberate, and almost invisible, until it wasn't. Most people never hear the next part. And that's the real danger. Because the final stage of this shift doesn't happen in central bank vaults or diplomatic meetings. It happens in the mind of a single, everyday person looking at their paycheck and their grocery bill. The next part might completely change how you see this toppies. All empires, all dominant currencies, believe their decline will be different. They imagine a controlled descent, a gentle passing of the torch. History whispers a darker truth. The end of monetary supremacy is never a quiet affair. It is paid for, in full, by the everyday lives of ordinary people. Washington pulled the trigger on the dollar's invincibility. And now, the bill is arriving, not in the halls of power, but in your home. This is where abstract policy meets concrete reality. The price is inflation. But that word has become an anesthetic. Let's call it what it is. The silent confiscation of your wealth. When the world's demand for your currency weakens, a brutal law of economics takes over. The excess dollars, printed for decades and now finding fewer foreign takers, don't disappear. They circulate back home. They chase the same number of goods, cars, houses, loaves of bread. More money chasing finite goods means one thing: higher prices. Your savings, your salary, your pension, they are all being quietly, persistently devalued. Think of your dollar as a share of stock in the USA Inc. For years, it was a blue chip stock, its value soaring. Every time Washington printed money without true economic backing, it diluted your shares. It sold more stock without creating more value. And now the global investors, other nations, are starting to sell their holdings. When the biggest shareholders lose faith, the share price falls. Your purchasing power is that share price. This isn't theory, it's a script written before. Look at the history of reserve currencies: the Spanish real, the Dutch guilder, the British pound. Their downfalls were not marked by a sudden stop, but by a long, painful squeeze. The pound's crisis in the 1960s forced brutal austerity on the British people, wage freezes, spending cuts, all to defend a parity that was no longer trusted by the world. The people paid for the empire's financial overreach. Now, imagine that global pressure meeting today's political reality in Washington. Can you imagine a modern political leader enacting the severe, immediate austerity needed to truly defend the dollar's value? To slash spending, raise taxes, and trigger a deep recession to restore global faith? The trigger they pulled was one of political convenience. The recoil is one of political impossibility. So the path of least resistance is chosen: tolerate the inflation. Let the currency slowly erode. Let the people pay the price through 1,000 small cuts. The more expensive grocery run, the unaffordable house, the shrinking retirement fund. The weapon of exorbitant privilege, once aimed outward, now points inward. The emotional core of this is a profound breach of trust. The social contract that said hard work and saving would lead to security is breaking. It breeds a deep societal anxiety, a feeling that the ground beneath your feet is turning to sand no matter how fast you run. This is the true cost. Not just numbers on a screen, but the fraying of stability, the death of long-term planning, the rise of a desperate short-term scramble. Washington pulled the trigger. The world is building an exit, and the American people will settle the bill. This is the tripartite drama of the dollar's reckoning. This is not a prediction of the dollar's imminent death. It remains the dominant currency. This is the story of its mortal wounding. The transition from only game in town to first among equals is a fragile, dangerous process. It is a road paved with inflation, volatility, and geopolitical tension. The pillar of the global cathedral is cracked. The architects are at work on new designs. And the congregation, the everyday citizens of the world, wait in the nave, feeling the drafts, watching the dust fall from the ceiling, wondering when the next tremor will come. The era of effortless dollar dominance is over. The price of that trigger pull is now due, and the collecting agent is reality itself. If you want to understand the forces that shape your money, your work, and your future, if you want stories that connect the dots between political decisions and the price of milk, then you need to understand the tales the economy tells. Subscribe to Economic Tales. We don't predict the future, we translate the present. Because in a world of shifting ground, understanding is the only true stability. Hit subscribe and see you in the next chapter. The day Washington weaponized money, the world stopped trusting the dollar. This wasn't just a sanction, it was a warning shot that changed global finance forever. There is a sound every empire eventually hears. It is not the crash of falling walls or the roar of a rebellious crowd. It is something far quieter, more subtle. It is the soft, almost imperceptible click of a trigger being pulled on its own foundation. And in the early 21st century, in the halls of Washington, that trigger was pulled. Not once, but again and again and again. The weapon wasn't a rifle. The ammunition wasn't lead. It was policy. It was the relentless, world-drowning flood of dollars printed to paper over every crisis. The financial meltdown, the pandemic, the geopolitical gambits, each event a justification. Each bailout and stimulus package, a bullet fired straight into the heart of a promise. The promise that a dollar was not just paper, but a rock-solid store of value, as good as gold itself. For decades, that promise was the bedrock of the modern world. Imagine the global economy as a magnificent, impossibly complex cathedral. Every arch, every flying buttress, every stained glass window of trade and finance was engineered around a single central pillar, the unwavering trust in the United States dollar. Oil was priced in it. Nations saved their wealth in it. It was the lingua franca of power. And Washington, as the guardian of this pillar, held a sacred trust. But then, the guardians started using the pillar for firewood. They burned it to keep the house warm through self-made winters. They chipped pieces off to build short-term shelters from political storms. They acted as if the pillar was infinite, its strength eternal. This is what we call exorbitant privilege, the unique power to pay your bills in your own currency, which you can create out of thin air. It is a power so intoxicating, so seductive, that the line between using it and abusing it becomes dangerously blurred. The psychological shift was gradual. Like a frog in slowly heating water, the world grew accustomed to the warmth of cheap money. Each new trillion printed was met not with alarm, but with a resigned sigh, then a rallying stock market. The fear was anesthetized, the urgency dissolved. Washington's political cycles, short, frantic, and hungry for immediate results, became addicted to the easy solution. The hard choices of fiscal discipline were shelved. The trigger was so easy to pull, and the sound was muffled by the roaring applause of temporary prosperity. But in physics and in finance, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. You cannot devalue the promise without devaluing the currency. You cannot weaponize the dollar's global reach, freezing reserves, cutting off banks, without forcing the world to ask a terrifying question. What if the hand holding the weapon turns it on us? The first cracks in the cathedral pillar weren't loud. They were whispers in backroom meetings in Beijing and Moscow. They were the silent, deliberate accumulation of gold in vaults in Frankfurt and Singapore. They were a quiet, calculated search for an exit door. The shot had been fired. And now the echo was beginning its long, slow return journey. But what happens next will change everything. Because the world didn't just stand there listening to the echo, it began to build a whole new cathedral, in secret. And this is where the video takes a shocking turn. In nature, when a dominant tree in a forest begins to sicken, something remarkable happens underground. A vast, hidden network of fungi and roots, a mycelial web, springs to life. It begins redirecting nutrients. It fosters new connections between the smaller, healthier trees. It prepares the entire ecosystem for a future beyond the giant. While Washington was focused on the immediate horizon, this exact phenomenon was unfolding in the global financial forest. The mycelial network of central banks, sovereign wealth funds, and geopolitical rivals was already at work. And they had one mission: to survive the potential fall of the dollar giant. Let's be clear. This wasn't about a single dramatic announcement. This was about the slow, relentless engineering of alternatives. Think of it not as a revolution, but as a silent secession. Scene 1, the gold vaults. For over a decade, central banks in the East and the global South have been net buyers of gold. Not just a little, thousands of tons. Why? Gold is the anti-dollar. It's no one's liability. It can't be frozen with a keyboard stroke in a Washington office. It is the ultimate financial insurance policy, purchased by nations who still remember what sovereignty means. This isn't speculation, it's preparation. Scene 2, the currency bypass. In 2022, the world watched as Russia's dollar reserves vanished from its accounts overnight. It was a masterclass in the weaponization of finance. It was also a wake-up call. Immediately, the architects went to work. China and Saudi Arabia began serious talks to price oil in yuan. India and Russia agreed to trade in rupees and rubles. Brazil and China settled deals in their own currencies. Each deal is a single thread, but woven together, they start to form a rope strong enough to climb out of the dollar-dominated system, the digital gambit. While the West debated cryptocurrencies, China was building the digital yuan, a centralized, state-controlled digital currency designed for one purpose: to facilitate cross-border trade outside the SWIFT messaging system, the nervous system of dollar transactions. It's a closed-loop highway for international trade, with toll booths operated by Beijing, not New York or Brussels. The psychology here is one of primal risk mitigation. It's the same reason you don't keep all your savings in one bank, or all your food in one pantry. These nations are diversifying away from a single point of failure, a point that has shown it can and will be used against them. They are building a parallel system, a financial lifeboat, quietly launched, while the old ship still appears seaworthy.